The Missouri Tigers under Eli Drinkwitz the last 4 years have massively outperformed expectations. You know, it's an expectation for a lot of Missouri fans to win 8, 9 games every year with, I would argue, significantly less talent. They've done a really nice job hiring guys on the coaching staff, done a really nice job developing really solid talent, like NFL level talent, which we haven't seen there in years, right? You got a schedule that's pretty favorable for you this year, at least in some instances, right? The 9-game SEC schedule, I think, benefits some teams. I think it does not benefit teams like Missouri that do not typically schedule tough out-of-conference games. The win total's at 6.5, slightly juiced to the over. I have some concerns, right? Kirby Moore goes off to Washington State, and I know Missouri fans, I know you guys don't like Kirby Moore. I know you don't, okay? But when you have like a 1,600-yard rusher and you get Brady Cook drafted to the NFL and, you go win a New Year's Six Bowl, I mean, what kind of resume are we talking about here? I mean, Kirby Moore is I refuse to say that he's a bad offensive coordinator. I refuse to say he's a bad play caller. I refuse to say that he's a bad game planner. Like, he's a good offensive coordinator. So, Missouri fans, you can hate me all you want, I guess, but I'm going to say it as it is. And if you think that Chip Lindsey is an upgrade over Kirby Moore, you may be sorely mistaken. You may be sorely mistaken. Just the grass isn't always greener, right? But I do admire the Missouri fans that want more, right? Because you do deserve more. You have great NIL legislation. You have lots of boosters. This is a big-time school. You can absolutely have success. So you should want more. And you should want the best. So I don't mind that attitude coming from Missouri fans at all. I'm just going to carefully warn you about Chip Lindsey. All right? I'm just going to warn you. CD, when we're looking at this Missouri team, where do they stack up maybe with the rest of the SEC? What are some things that you're looking for, and what are you excited about for 2026 for Missouri?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, looking to build off the momentum that was last year. I think we were talking about this a little bit off air. This is one of the better teams we've ever seen for Missouri in terms of what they did in 2025. They were top 5 offensively. Statistically, if you look at it in the SEC, they were top 2 defensively. Like, that was a really talented defense. Unfortunately, you still that offensive output was still, even in light of all the injuries you had at the quarterback position. Obviously, Ahmad Hardy was a dude for you all along, which was fantastic. Jamal Roberts, was also fantastic. We'll see how it goes this year. I think, unfortunately, you got a lot to replace defensively. You got some really good receivers you're also replacing as well. I think the offensive line is going to be pretty good still, so there's light there. But yeah, I to be honest, in terms of the expectations, like, obviously Missouri fans aren't going to like this, but like, to me, I expect them to make a bowl, right? And I don't expect them to be competing for an SEC title come November, or even a New Year's Six, or anything along those lines. Playoffs, which I know is in the expectations for Missouri's fan base, which is understandable and realistic. But this is it's a tough. It might be a drop off of a year.
Sure, right? And there are, in every conference, there has to be teams that go 6-6, 7-5, 8-4. I think 8-4 with this schedule. I mean, that means you stole a couple games against some teams that are more against teams that are more talented than you. And that's not to say that they can't do it, but it is going to be interesting. There are some questions that we have about this roster. There's some questions about the coaching staff that we have for sure. At the quarterback position, bringing in Austin Simmons plus, all right, I think that's an upgrade. Potentially an up. I know Bo Pribula looked really good early in the season last year, but you also look at the schedule that he played against, and he looked really, really good in some of those games where the talent there was a lot larger talent gap, right? But Matt Zollers, we saw him. I think he looked really good at times. You say this all the time with backup quarterbacks, young guys. You saw flashes, right? He just might not be ready. Okay, Austin Simmons won the job over Trinidad James. Was looked at very favorably from Lane Kiffin. He was a guy that reclassified. Remember, he was a guy that reclassified to be at Ole Miss, and he rolled there. I think when he was 16, like he was super young. So you want to think about like the mental development there. I mean, now you got a guy like several years later that's actually an adult. It's like I think he's a pretty good football player, and you saw the interceptions early last year before the injury, and then bringing in Trinidad Chambers, and then eventually Chambers just kind of took over. But I think Austin Simmons is a very good football player. I think he's a very good quarterback. I think that this could potentially be looked at as an upgrade over Bo Pribula.
No, I'm with you there. I think he was so good. To me, this was my most exciting quarterback prospect in the portal. I understand the talent and the experience and the excitement of some of the other guys that are ranked a little bit higher than him. But well done, Drink. This was a fantastic get. He's got an incredible arm. I can't wait to see him develop. I know when he went in the portal, it was pretty quick. Boom, boom, boom. Missouri was right on him. Um, Shows you how much they wanted him and how impressive it was for them to get that done quickly because he had a lot of suitors. You talked about Zollers. I do still like his future. Got thrown in too early, but again, that's going to happen. I think it'll be nice for him to sit behind Simmons. And then even learn from a guy like Garrett Riley. Didn't work out at Clemson, but I still think he's got some value as a coach here. And obviously with Drink and Lindsey and all those guys in that offensive staff room will be fantastic. So I think this will be a better room than last year for sure. Right?
Yeah, I think
Especially,
so.
yeah. And it probably can withstand the injuries more. Well, maybe not. Maybe you can't get to your third guy. Well,
Yeah, I think you can. This is more depth than you had last year. I think Austin Simmons is better than Pribula potentially. We'll see
yeah,
how
I agree.
2026 plays out. And then Matt Zollers, you get 2026 Matt Zollers versus 2025 Matt Zollers, right? Where Matt Zollers, he comes into the game against Vanderbilt and like throws some darts. Like you see the arm talent there, but maybe the mental processing, right, when he played against A&M, it just wasn't there, right? I mean, like it was something crazy like 9 straight incompletions, 10, whatever it was. He didn't look like himself. He was not comfortable. But maybe, another year in this system, another year older, another year seeing college defenses, another year in the weight room. Yeah, maybe he's seeing things a little bit better. Now, the running back room, okay, I'm not going to pretend like I know exactly what's going on. I don't know exactly if anyone really knows quite what's going on with Ahmad Hardy. Unfortunately, that situation where he was shot. Um, we've seen players recover from that before. Of course, we wish him a speedy recovery because he is a dynamic football player. He was unbelievable in the Brian Vincent offense as a true freshman. He transfers to Missouri. We talked about it. We're like, hey, this guy's a dude. He was. He was unbelievable to watch. He is so fun. He is such a good athlete. He's got giddy up speed. He is so nice. Um, I I look at this running back room and I'm like, okay, what does it look like here if Ahmad Hardy is not, playing the first month of the season or 2 months of the season? I don't know. I don't know what that's going to look like. I still think that they have some absolute dudes in this room. You brought in a couple of transfers that are exciting prospects for sure. But Ahmad Hardy, I think the ceiling of the offense is probably met with him in the backfield.
1,000%. I mean, he's one of the top 10 players in college football, period. And when he is healthy, so hopefully he gets a speedy recovery. Again, that's a tough one. So we'll see what happens with his future. I hope to get some updates soon and all that stuff. Because he does have a bright future ahead of him in football, especially. Jamal Roberts, though, like huge for Missouri to retain them.
Yeah.
Like, how important does he become in this offense? Because he had a lot of suitors too, right? And
Yeah.
it was like, oh, he's just going to leave because of Hardy's coming back. And Missouri was able to retain him. And boy, are they glad they did that. He was also over 6 yards per carry. Obviously, not the volume that Hardy had, but still really, really good and can compete in the SEC. I remember when they got those two guys last year in the portal, it was like, oh, we're getting the G5 guys, whatever. And it's like, no, watch these guys play. They were fantastic. And obviously, they both hit. Another smaller school kid joining them this year. Zayshawn Edwards is someone that all of a sudden gets bumped up to RB2 if Hardy can't go. He was an FCS freshman All American, over 5 yards per carry, over 1,000 yards at Houston Christian. Super excited to see him get some run, especially without Hardy here for indefinitely, right? And then we'll see about Fonoti, the transfer coming in, and then Max Warner as well, rounding out that room, the young guy. So about as good as this is about as good as you can handle. Hey, we're
Right.
losing a top 10 player in college football at our position group, and we still feel like it's a strength of our offense.
Yeah, Jamal Roberts is really good. I think also we'll talk about when we get to the offensive line. I think it also was a product and a testament, tip of the cap to their offensive line, which they lose quite a bit of this year. Uh, so that's going to be a conversation for sure. Jamal Roberts is awesome. I love his game. I think he's very good. Ahmad Hardy is better, right? Your offense hits that ceiling with him in there. But a good room, nonetheless. Something that you have to monitor the situation because of the level that he's at. But obviously, with the positional value of the running back position, you can look at it a little bit differently than you can with other positions. Wide receiver, CD. Wide receiver. You bring over, I think in the portal, I think you got some pretty decent guys. You lose Kevin Coleman, right? That was the big one. Okay, the transfer that you got. He's at Mississippi State and Louisville before that. He was there. He was awesome. He was really good for you. Obviously, off the Dolphins, probably going to beat out the guy that got drafted ahead of him. He's a really good football player. Joshua Manning is out. Marquise Johnson is out. I mean, you're looking at some guys here in the portal. Caden Lee, the repertoire that he has with Austin Simmons, the chemistry coming from Ole Miss, I think that is a huge plus. By the way, I thought Caden Lee was going to be like a more significant part of the offense than he was last year. He still had 600 yards. I thought he was going to be even better. Like you saw Caden Lee whenever Trey Harris was out for Ole Miss in 2025. Sorry, excuse me, 2024. You were like, you saw this Caden Lee guy. You were like, oh my gosh, this guy's playing on Sundays. This guy's unbelievable. So I think that is actually a huge get. You look at the 2025 stats, I don't think that tells the full story. Also, Caleb Goody, came from Colorado State, went to Cincinnati, right? Played with Brendan Sorsby. That whole room is just made up of like a bunch of transfer portal meshed together, sort of sandwiched. Brendan Sorsby's doing whatever he was doing. It's not like Brendan Sorsby's an elite passer either, but Caleb Goody was very good. For lack of better words, I think he's a very good number 2 guy to have there. You got some young guys, Olubodi. I mean, you have some dudes here in this room that I think are pretty solid that are going to be. It's hard to replace, I guess, Kevin Coleman, but I think that this wide receiver room potentially could be better than last year's, and I think that might be a hot take to some people.
Yeah, dude, Do Luke Bode, like he was a guy that popped every time that I felt like I was watching Missouri, especially in that second half of the year in the SEC schedule. Excited to see him take a jump in year 2. You talked about Caden Lee, the chemistry he has with Austin Simmons. Excited to see him in more of an expanded role. And then good, you mentioned like Simmons actually has the arm talent to like take advantage of that too. You know what I mean? So like that's a lot of fun. You got some younger guys. Sean Terry, we'll see, former 4-star kid, get some run. Kendrick Lanier coming over from Minnesota. He was a Army All-American in high school. Talented dude. Never really cracked the rotation at Minnesota. Although who knows why? I think it's pretty interesting. The wide receiver coach at Minnesota just got fired there, so it was a little bit of a surprise, I think, to Minnesota fans that why Lanier wasn't playing more. But he's more of a depth guy in this room. I wouldn't. It would be remiss. It'd be tough to say this room gets better. That a lot of that is on the upside of Oluk Bode, and then I think what a guy like Simmons can do to unlock this room potentially might be more productive. Like 2,400 yards, I expect Simmons to throw for more than that.
I mean, I think just like the reason why I think that this room could be better is because what are you, it's about what are you projecting Caden Lee to be? You know, I I think that he was in a great offensive system. I just think for whatever reason, I don't know why they handcuffed him a little bit last year. Like I thought that they could do more with him, and they didn't. Now they had some other dudes in that wide receiver room that were awesome. Uh, so they were spreading the ball out, pretty well. But Caden Lee could be a 1,000 yard guy potentially on this team. I don't know. I don't know what the distribution is going to look like, but I think the repertoire and the chemistry that he has with Austin Simmons, it can't hurt him. There's no way. Uh, so I just think that Caden Lee is. I don't even know that it's a sleeper pick, but preseason All SEC. Like in my mind, if I was making a preseason All SEC team, like I would have a tough time not putting Caden Lee on that list, despite the elite wide receivers across the conference.
Yeah, and that would unlock the upside of this offense for sure. The tight end room is a lot of fun. Everyone's getting back, right? Um, Norfleet, I think, is really good. Hopefully, he stays healthy. I love his game. I know there's talks about him improving as a blocker. So we'll see what happens as he matures into his fourth year there. Also, we haven't really talked too much about this, but the five to play five is huge for a guy like Norfleet, right? Like, um, but anyways, James coming back, Harris coming back, so you got all those the fellas coming back. So it should be a good room, solid room for Simmons to work with, and another room where like you're working on spraying that run game. I think a lot of that, what they did last year, needs to be credited to this room here too. So not bad at all. As far as tight end rooms go, I love it.
Yeah, on the offensive line, right? You lose some important pieces, right? Keegan Trust, Connor
Yeah.
Tollison, Tollison obviously being just they're both there were some good players that they lost in this offensive line. Okay. But you look at some of the guys they brought in the portal, I don't mind. Uh, I don't really mind a ton at all what they brought in the portal and some of the guys that they're retaining, right? Caden Green, guy that they got from Oklahoma a couple years back, played guard at Oklahoma, I believe, if I'm right about that. Kicked out the tackle. He's a very solid player. Um, Curtis Piegler, I think, is a very solid player. Are they going to move? Are they going to slide over their guard there? Judice. Sorry, I don't know how to say that, but
Judice. I think
Judice.
Dominic Judice. He sounds like he's playing center, and Peeler will play right guard. So uh,
So,
it's a
I,
good crew to start with. Those three returning.
yeah. Is it going to be worse than last year's group? I don't know. It's hard to say. You did lose two really, really good football players there. But Josh Atkins, who you brought over from Arizona State, I don't think he's a bad football player at all.
Yep.
Sliding over to right tackle, don't mind that at all. Uh, is he Keegan Trust? I don't know. I don't think so, but we'll see. He's an older guy, got plenty of experience. I mean, you're still looking across this offensive line, and you still have, despite losing some of your top guys, you still have experience all over the place. So I don't mind. I don't mind the five that they got out there, and then even some of the guy like Luke Work. Uh, I don't mind him at all. So there's some guys on this roster that I don't mind, even though you lost some guys in the portal,
Yeah,
depth
Logan
pieces. I
Reichert,
mean,
another guy I would mention. He was hurt last year. Staff really likes him and what he can do in this offense. So like, not bad at all in terms of depth, quality depth at the tackle position. We'll see if Atkins is healthy. I know he was banged up in camp or in springtime there, so hope to see him healthy to really round out this offensive line. But I think it not a room I'm worried about here. Much less worried about this offensive line and the defensive line.
agreed. Defensive line, CD. I mean, like you got. I mean, a 95th percentile outcome from your defensive line. Is that crazy to say? I mean,
No.
you knew what you had coming. You knew you had some really good talent on the, you know, uh, off the edge. Damon Wilson, Zion Young, one of the best edge rushing duos potentially in the entire country. They were nuts last year. All right, incredibly disruptive. They were good. Chris McClellan ended up going to the NFL. I mean, these guys were unbelievable. That uh, that front four. Now you're looking at this. It's like you were kind of betting on the upside of some guys that not as not as proven as the guys that walked out the door, right? Uh, so I mean, I'm looking at this and it's a little bit more concerning. But if your questions for these players end up getting answered in a big way, I mean, all of a sudden you look at these matchups against some teams that have a little bit more meat on their offensive line, the defensive line, like the Floridas and the A&Ms, and you start to ask yourself, like, hey, do they have a chance in these games? And maybe split that. Find a way to get to 7, 8 wins instead of that maybe 6-6 more.
Yeah, the thing I worry about is I do believe in the staff's belief in their defensive line. Guys like Kitchen, um, Marshall, Wright, Graciel, Smith, all those guys that are returning to kind of step up and elevate into the first team role. And I think there will be a drop off of high end talent in big time playmaking. But that's just like it's going to happen when you have a top 10 defensive line in the country, right? But what I worry about is the depth behind them. Like those were your depth guys last year. You had 22 and 23-year-olds as your depth last year that are really good players that looked good and they gave you 200, 300 snaps that were awesome. And now they have to get bumped up to 400, 500 snaps. Who's going to backfill behind them? That would be the one thing I'm concerned about because when you took off, you were able to keep Young and Wilson and all those guys fresh, right? But now Smith and Kitchen, these guys off the edge, they're going to be the ones with bearing all that weight. And like, how are guys like transfers like Jaden Jones, Malik Bryan, like, are they going to be dudes for you? Cameron Morgan. So like, it. I don't know. That's I think an interesting factor to look at here because of how good it was. Not only the frontline guys, the depth was good. Now your depth becomes your starters. Can you backfill? It's really hard to do in college football in 2026 because of how hard it is to build depth along the trenches.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Fortunately, though, like say say you get like you know, I, well, let me ask you this: if to you this is the most important indicative position of the success of the Missouri defense this year, what kind of play do you think that they need to get to get to that 8-win mark?
75, 80% of what you got last year, right? Just got to pass. That doesn't have to be the copy and paste. I think that would be, again, would be awesome. I do not see that kind of elite high end talent with these guys. And then also the depth, too, like in terms of not having drop offs, that big drop offs when you go to your depth. So, yeah, this is huge here because you are talking about the difference between 5 wins and 8 wins, right? And that's just the reality and the margins of college football and in the SEC. You got road games like Mississippi State, who it's tough, like actually a tough game. It's no longer like, oh, we're going to Mississippi State, we're going to Starkville, whatever. We'll have a fun fan base. We can go travel and make a time out of Stark Vegas. No, like absolutely not. Even Kentucky later in the year. You're telling me Will Stein's not going to have those boys humming all those transfers? Like, I don't know, man. This is a really important group here. Really important group. One to watch early. See how they do against Kentucky, and then you got to be ready for Mississippi State.
Yeah, definitely. It makes me a lot more confident in this squad defensively that you brought in some really nice linebacker transfers, I thought, right? Josiah Trotter, phenomenal football player, NFL draft caliber guy, okay, but you get back Nick Rodriguez, Robert Woodyard, just be able to pluck him out of the portal. I mean, that's pretty big time. If I'm that's pretty big time. I mean, and credit to the Missouri staff for some of the guys that they were able to bring in the portal. You talked about Austin Simmons already, right? The Caden Lees, Robert Woodyard. I would put also in that class of like really, really nice portal gets that other teams were definitely clamoring for.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, you lose your top three guys, or three of your top guys, right? And you get to backfill with a guy like Woodyard, pairing with Rodriguez. Not a bad crew here, Beasley and McClellan behind them. So again, much more focus on the defensive line than on linebackers. And these guys might have a bigger role if you don't get elite play from your front four, right? Like we kind of talk about a lot of these defenses. But it would be nice to get some stability in your second line, the green dot players, all that kind of stuff. Get the defense running smooth, so your front line and back line can really get after it defensively.
So now you go to the secondary, and it was clear the staff right needed to overall the talent that they lost, right? So they dipped heavily in the transfer portal. I also want to point out, like, what percentage of a team's pass defense do you attribute to their pass rush, like in elite pass rush, such as Missouri's, for example? How much do you attribute it to the secondary? I think that they had some pretty good talent in there, obviously, but what is the drop off going to look like here in the secondary when you don't maybe have, your 95th percentile, pass rush that outcome that you had last year? What is that going to look
Well,
like? Do you have the
well,
talent to backload this? I, questions that I have for sure.
absolutely. And no, I think Chris Graves is a really nice get for him in the portal. Um, Guy with SEC experience, right? I think he'll be your best cornerback. You pair him with another talented guy like Jaleel Florence, who just unfortunately got over recruited at Oregon. He comes over with Sion Lale, who's 6'4" and lengthy. So we'll see what happens there. Nick Deloach has some experience for you at corner as well. So I don't think it's a terrible room in terms of when you have to replace um, Pride and Carnell and Norwood. Like you got a lot of dudes in that cornerback room to replace. You get done in a pretty good way. Not too bad. And then at nickel, Elijah Dotson, right, Jadon Blair. Excited to see Dotson play here. You get the backfill and the nickel position. So listen, I think it could be a pretty good room. There's some talent, there's some experience and length, and a lot of the good combinations for that makes a good SEC defensive backfield. It's in that cornerback room. Oh, he's muted. Oh, he's muted.
The mute button. What I'll say though, like, is the staff. This staff and previous defensive staff has done a really good job with transfer portal quarterbacks. So to say that just because they're bringing in a bunch of transfer portal corners, some of them a little bit more unproven than others, it doesn't mean it's going to be a bad secondary. Like you talked about, they got some length in there. They've got some guys that were highly recruited, just like maybe got out recruited, what have you. You know, I I still think that this room could be fine, but my concern would be like, all right, what is it going to look like if you don't have, 36 sacks, in a season? What does that defense look like? What happens, um, if maybe the interior isn't great or as great as you want it to be? Maybe it's, I don't know. I'm just saying, what I'm trying to say is that the defense is what scares me a little bit more than the offense. And I think if Missouri is going to hit their ceiling, it has to be because Corey Batoon puts on an absolute masterclass. And if he does, again, by the way, this would be the third straight year that he's put on an absolute masterclass when no one has expected him to. And what do you say then about that? I mean, is he, at that point, you have to look at him and you're like, okay, this is probably a top 10 defensive coordinator in college football. Maybe it wasn't just Blake Baker and Blake Baker's players. Maybe Corey Batoon is just a dude. It was a consecutive hire. That's what you have to do as a head coach. You have to consecutively hire very good coordinators. And if you're a program, you got to consecutively hire good coaches, especially if you're not one of the tier one programs, that can retain their coaches forever because it's a tier one program. But these are all things to consider when we're talking about the Missouri Tigers, what their ceiling is, what their floor is. When I look at their floor, CD, hasn't necessarily been something that we brought up. I just think that there's a lot of more parity in the SEC and I think you saw it some last year. I think that there are every team that you're going to be playing against has a chance to beat just about anyone, which feels weird to say in the SEC because we're used to the bottom feeders. But I like Kentucky's roster a lot. I don't mind Mississippi State's roster. And by the way, Jeff Lebby scares me every time. He scares me every time. Arkansas, I'm not in love with their roster and what they did. So, maybe that one you can chalk up potentially in the preseason. But I'm not chalking up all these. Like when I'm counting wins, I'm not just circling. Like I'm circling the 3 non-conference games, but I'm not necessarily circling all of the teams that I think Missouri fans are circling, which maybe I'll be wrong about that. I've been very wrong about Missouri before in the past, but it's just something that I'm looking at, and you see the 6.5 win total, and I think Missouri fans are going to think that that's a little low, and I'm going to say that I don't know. I think that's probably right. I think the floors here's maybe 4-8, 5-7. I think 4-8 would be like if the wheels really fell off, and you got a negative outcome defensive line. You had some injuries on the offensive side of the football. Austin Simmons is turning the ball over like you saw early on in 2025. That would be like where you hit your 4-8, and that would be an absolute disaster class. I think a more realistic floor is 6-6, 5-7, with the potential ceiling of that 8-4, 9-3. And if that happened, those outcomes happened, I mean, what are we talking about? That would be a master class by Corey Platoon. That means Austin Simmons hit his ceiling. That means Ahmad Hardy's healthy. That means things are clicking. And, I mean, what a time would it be to be a Missouri fan in that instance?
No, absolutely. You said it. Unfortunately, there is some variance with this schedule, and it's tough. And I think if you don't get off to a hot start, and I'm talking about 4-0, like if you want to accomplish your goals, whatever they may be with Missouri, it has to be 4-0 in the month of September. October could be rough with Florida, A&M, and Ole Miss. Obviously Ole Miss not going to be the team that finished runner up last year or close to it, but um, Florida gets better. A&M, it's gonna be tough. They've had your number for a couple years now, and then all of a sudden, in November, you're looking at Texas, Georgia, and Oklahoma. And Oklahoma's one of those teams that you and I. First of all, they went to the playoffs last year. People forgetting that. And Oklahoma's team, you and I, especially you, extremely, extremely good. High on. They could be a scary team in the SEC. So there's not a lot of in between here. And in that month of September and October, you better be humming. And if you are a team replacing a ton defensively, like you cannot get off to a slow start. You have to hit on your portal guys and your development and your recruiting and what you are doing to backfill these guys. I'm going to lean the under here. And I know it's 6.5 is a low line for Missouri for a team that was so good last year, but I think they take a step back. I think 8 wins, we talked about it, would be a tremendous success. At 9 wins, you are staring down the playoffs and you are staring down Coach of the Year for Drink. You are staring down Broyles Award for Platoon. So it would be a tremendous outcome for you there. Like you said, much more realistic. Probably 6-6 more than your R7-5, and that's just because of how hard it is to win in the SEC. Because yeah, and I'm gonna leave it at that.
I'm with you. I'll lean under here. I guess I didn't talk about my pick with the win total, but I'll lean under. But here's the thing. I mean, with the names that you're seeing on this roster, right? Things change so fast in college football. Like once we get through these first 3 weeks, then all of a sudden Missouri's 3-0, and we see some really plus play on the defensive line. I mean, I'm recalibrating big time. I'm definitely recalibrating.
Yeah.
But I'm excited for what this offense is going to look like because I think you got some really nice talent in there. You got some really nice outcomes from players on the offensive side of the ball last year. But if you stay healthy at the quarterback spot, Ahmad Hardy, hopefully he can get healthy for this season at some point, and we get a really nice offense. Pair that with, if you get a 75th percentile defense, so you get a top 35 defense in college football, I think you win 7 games, maybe 8 games. But is it going to be a top 30, 35 defense? I don't know. That's kind of the question that we got to ask ourselves.